Jake Sullivan's life in Austin, Texas, was the kind most people envied. At 35, he ran Brood Awakening, a bustling coffee shop he'd inherited from his dad. The place was more than a business. It was the heart of the neighborhood. Locals packed the counter daily, drawn by Jake's easy grin and the shop's role as a community hub. He organized monthly fundraisers for schools, handed out free coffee to first responders, and always had time to chat with regulars about their lives. Everyone knew Jake as the guy who'd give you the shirt off his back, no questions asked. His wife, Emma, 32, was just as admired. A volunteer at Grace Point Church, she threw herself into every cause: food drives, youth mentorship, charity auctions. Her energy was infectious. She'd rally dozens to help families in need, her laughter filling the room as she coordinated events. Together, Jake and Emma were the couple everyone looked up to. Their marriage seemed bulletproof. Emma left her phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. No passwords, no secrets. Jake knew her passcode anyway. Not that he ever checked. Trust was their foundation, or so he thought. It started with a text. Late one Tuesday, Jake was wiping down the coffee shop's counter after closing when Emma's phone, left on a stool, lit up. He glanced over, expecting another church group chat. Instead, the screen showed a message from an unsaved number. "Meet me at 9. Usual spot." No name, no context. Jake's stomach twisted, but he shook it off. Emma was probably just organizing another last-minute volunteer thing. She'd been doing that a lot lately, staying late at church, coming home after 10 p.m. with stories of sorting donations or planning prayer groups. He'd always nodded along, proud of her dedication. But the text nagged at him. Emma breezed in to grab her phone, her usual bright smile in place. "Just a volunteer checking in," she said, slipping the phone into her pocket without a second glance. Jake forced a nod, but the words "usual spot" looped in his mind. He didn't ask about it. Not yet. Instead, he locked up the shop and drove home, the Austin skyline glowing against the night. At their cozy bungalow, Emma was already in bed, scrolling through her phone, chatting about a new charity project. Everything seemed normal. Too normal. The next week, Emma's late nights ramped up. She'd leave for church meetings 3, sometimes 4 evenings, always with a plausible excuse. A fundraiser needed extra hands, a family needed emergency supplies, a prayer group ran long. Her stories were detailed, her tone casual, but Jake started noticing gaps. She'd mention people he'd never heard of, or her phone would buzz at odd hours, only for her to silence it with a quick, "It's nothing." He tried to push the unease down. Emma was the last person who'd hide anything. She was the woman who'd spent their honeymoon volunteering at a local shelter, for God's sake. Then came the night that cracked his trust. Jake was driving home late after a delivery mix-up at the shop. His route took him past the I-35 underpass, a gritty stretch of Austin dotted with cheap motels and fast food joints. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted Emma's blue Honda parked outside the Lone Star Inn, a rundown motel nobody with good intentions visited. His heart thudded. She'd told him she was at Grace Point, helping with a food drive until midnight. He slowed the car, staring at the motel's flickering neon sign. Her car was unmistakable, same dent on the bumper from a fender bender last year. Jake didn't stop. He gripped the wheel and kept driving, his mind racing. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she'd loaned her car to someone. But the text from last week echoed. "Usual spot." Was this the spot? He pulled into their driveway, his pulse hammering. Emma wasn't home yet. He waited, staring at the clock as it ticked past 11 p.m., then midnight. When she finally walked in at 12:47 a.m., she looked tired but cheerful, launching into a story about how the food drive had been a mess but worth it. Jake listened, his face neutral, but every word felt like a test he was failing. The next morning, he made a decision. He couldn't keep second-guessing himself. If there was nothing to find, he'd clear his conscience. If there was something, well, he'd deal with it. Over his morning coffee, he searched for a private investigator on his phone, landing on Lisa Carter, a former cop-turned-PI with a no-nonsense reputation. Her website promised discretion and results. Jake called her, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. They set a meeting for that afternoon. Lisa's office was a small, no-frills space in downtown Austin, just a desk and a laptop. She was in her late 40s, sharp-eyed, with a handshake that meant business. Jake laid it all out. Emma's late nights, the text, the motel. He didn't sugarcoat his suspicions or play the heartbroken husband. Lisa listened, jotting notes, her face unreadable. "I'll start today," she said. "Give me a week." Motels. Jake nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. He handed over a photo of Emma and a list of her recent church events. Lisa promised updates in a few days. As he left, Jake felt lighter, like he'd offloaded a weight, but the real burden was still coming. Back at the coffee shop, Jake threw himself into work, but his mind was elsewhere. Every customer's order felt like a distraction from the ticking clock of Lisa's investigation. Emma came by the shop that evening, dropping off a batch of homemade scones for the next day's fundraiser. She kissed his cheek, her smile as warm as ever, and Jake's chest tightened. Was he wrong? Was he paranoid? But the image of her car at that motel burned in his mind, and he knew he wouldn't rest until he had answers. Jake Sullivan's days at Brood Awakening dragged on, each one heavier than the last. The coffee shop, usually his sanctuary, felt like a stage where he played the part of the cheerful owner while his mind churned with doubt. Emma's late nights at Grace Point Church had become a pattern. 3, sometimes 4 evenings a week, always with a new excuse. A youth group needed supplies. A prayer meeting ran overtime. A last-minute crisis demanded her help. Her stories were polished, delivered with a smile that used to put Jake at ease. Now, each word deep in the pit in his stomach. The image of Emma's blue Honda parked at the Lone Star haunted him. He hadn't confronted her, not yet. Instead, he'd hired Lisa Carter, a private investigator with a knack for uncovering truths people wanted buried. Lisa had been on the case for 3 days, and Jake's phone stayed silent. He checked it compulsively between pouring lattes and ringing up customers, half hoping for a message that would clear Emma's name, half dreading the truth he suspected was coming. On the 4th day, Lisa called. Her voice was clipped, professional. "Got something. Meet me at my office, 3 p.m. Jake's heart raced, but he kept his tone steady. "I'll be there." He handed the shop's keys to his assistant manager, claiming a quick errand, and drove downtown through Austin's midday traffic. His hands gripped the wheel, knuckles pale, as he replayed every moment of doubt. The cryptic text, "Meet me at 9. Usual spot. Emma's breezy dismissal, her car at that seedy motel. He needed answers, not suspicions. Lisa's office was as bare as before, just a desk and a stack of files. She didn't waste time. "I followed Emma last night," she said, sliding a manila folder across the desk. Jake opened it, his pulse hammering. Inside were photos, grainy but unmistakable. Emma, stepping out of her Honda at the Lone Star Inn. A man joined her, his arm brushing hers as they walked toward a room. Jake recognized him instantly. Tom Reynolds, a deacon at Grace Point, always front and center church events, shaking hands with a politician's charm. Married, 2 kids, the kind of guy everyone trusted. The timestamp on the photo read 9:47 p.m., right when Emma had texted Jake she was stuck at a planning session. "There's more," Lisa said, her tone neutral. She handed him a log, dates, times, license plates. Emma and Tom had been to the motel 4 times in 2 weeks, always after her supposed church commitments. Jake stared at the evidence, his chest tight. The photos showed them entering a room, then leaving an hour later, Tom's hand on her back, Emma laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. "They're careful," Lisa added. "Same hotel, same time, no calls on her main phone. Likely using burners." Jake nodded, his jaw clenched. He didn't trust himself to speak. Back at the coffee shop, Jake moved through the evening rush like a robot. Customers chatted, the espresso machine hissed, but his mind was locked on the photos. Emma came by at closing, dropping off flyers for a church fundraiser. She leaned over the counter, her voice bright. "Big event tomorrow night. Might be late again. Lots to set up." Jake forced a smile, his stomach churning. "Sure. Do what you need to." She kissed his cheek and left, her car pulling away toward Grace Point, or so she said. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He lay in their bed, staring at the ceiling, the folder from Lisa hidden in his desk downstairs. Emma's side of the bed was empty. She'd texted about another late meeting. At 11 p.m., he grabbed his keys and drove to the Lone Star Inn, parking across the street. Her Honda was there, same spot as before. He waited, his breath shallow, watching the motel's flickering neon sign. At 11:32, Emma and Tom emerged, their steps casual, like this was routine. Jake's hand shook, but he stayed put, snapping a photo with his phone as proof, not for Lisa, but for himself. The next morning, Jake met Lisa again. He slid his photo across her desk. "Caught them last night. Same place." Lisa nodded, unsurprised. "Want to keep digging?" she asked. Jake hesitated. He had enough to confront Emma, but something held him back. Was it fear of the truth, or a need to know how deep the lie went? "One more week," he said. "Find out how long this has been going on." Lisa agreed, promising a full report by Monday. Jake spent the weekend in a haze, keeping up appearances at the shop while tracking Emma's movements in his head. She was at the fundraiser Friday night, or so she claimed, texting him updates about the event's success. Saturday, she was home, cooking dinner and laughing about a church volunteer's bad karaoke. Her normalcy was infuriating. How could she lie so effortlessly? Sunday, she announced another late night, this time for a crisis meeting with the church board. Jake didn't argue. He just nodded, his plan forming. Monday morning, Lisa called again. "Got the full picture," she said. "Meet me at noon." Jake arrived early, his nerves frayed. Lisa handed him a thicker folder this time. More photos, more logs, and a bombshell. Emma and Tom had been meeting for at least 3 months, always at the Lone Star Inn, always under the guise of church work. Lisa had even tracked down a burner phone number Tom used to text Emma, though the messages were deleted. "They're not amateurs," Lisa said, "but they're not invisible." Jake thanked her, paid the invoice, and left with the folder under his arm. Driving back to the shop, his mind was clear for the first time in weeks. No more doubts, no more excuses. He'd confront Emma, but not recklessly. He needed a plan, one that would expose the truth without letting her twist it. As he parked outside Brood Awakening, his phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Late night again. Church stuff. Love you." Jake stared at the words, his resolve hardening. Tonight, he'd be waiting at the motel, ready to end the lies. Jake Sullivan's hands were steady as he locked up Brood Awakening, but his heart pounded like a drum. The folder from Lisa Carter, his private investigator, sat on the passenger seat of his truck, its contents burning a hole in his mind. Photos of his wife, Emma, with Tom Reynolds, a church deacon, sneaking into the Lone Star Inn. 3 months of lies, hidden behind Emma's cheerful excuses about church work. Tonight, she'd texted again, "Late night, church meeting, love you," but Jake knew better. He was done waiting. Tonight, he'd confront her. He drove through Austin's quiet streets, the city's glow fading into the grimy stretch of I-35 where the motel squatted. He parked across from the Lone Star Inn, his truck blending into the shadows of a closed gas station. Emma's blue Honda was already there, parked near the motel's far end, next to Tom's black SUV. Jake checked his phone. 9:15 p.m. He settled in, his eyes locked on the motel's row of doors, each one a potential exit for the truth he'd been dreading. Minutes ticked by slow and heavy. Jake's phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Meeting's running long. Might be midnight. Don't wait up." The lie was so blatant it almost made him laugh. He didn't reply. Instead, he pulled the folder from the seat, flipping through Lisa's photos again. Emma and Tom, arm in arm, laughing as they entered room 17. The timestamp stretched back months, each one a betrayal. Lisa's logs confirmed their routine. Same hotel, same nights, always when Emma claimed to be at Grace Point Church. At 10:03 p.m., a door creaked open. Emma stepped out, her head tilted toward Tom, who followed close behind. They paused by her car, their voices low, too far for Jake to hear. Tom leaned in, whispering something that made Emma smile, a smile Jake hadn't seen in months. His grip tightened on the steering wheel, but he stayed calm, his plan clear. He started the engine, pulled across the street, and parked beside Emma's Honda, blocking her in. The headlights caught them both, freezing them like deer. Emma's eyes widened as Jake stepped out. Tom took a step back, his face pale. "Jake," Emma stammered, her voice cracking. "What are you doing here?" Jake didn't answer right away. He reached into the truck, grabbed the folder, and held it up, letting the weight of it speak. "No more church excuses, Emma," he said, his tone ice cold. "I know where you've been. I know who you're with." He tossed the folder onto the hood of her car, photos spilling out. Images of her and Tom, undeniable. Tom tried to speak. "Jake, listen, this isn't." Jake cut him off with a look sharp enough to silence him. "Don't," Jake said. "You're not worth my words." Emma's hand shook as she picked up a photo, her breath hitching. "Jake, I can explain," she said, her voice desperate. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for this to happen." Jake didn't flinch. 3 months of mistakes. Save it. He pointed to the photos. "You've been lying to my face, coming home like nothing's wrong. I'm done." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but Jake wasn't moved. He'd spent weeks wrestling with doubt, hoping he was wrong. Now, the truth was in front of him, raw and unfiltered. "Get in your car," he said. "We're going home." Now, Tom shifted, like he might intervene, but Jake's stare pinned him in place. "You stay out of this," Jake said. "You'll deal with your own mess soon enough." Tom backed off, muttering something about leaving, and slipped into his SUV, peeling out of the lot. Emma climbed into her Honda, silent, her head bowed. Jake followed in his truck, the drive to their bungalow tense and wordless. At home, he parked and waited as she got out, clutching the folder like it was a lifeline. Inside, she tried again to explain. "It started as nothing," she said, pacing the kitchen. "Tom was helping with a fundraiser. We got close, it just happened. I swear I was going to end it." Her voice broke, but Jake stayed stone-faced. "You didn't end it," he said. "You planned it. Every week, same lies, same motel." She sank into a chair, sobbing. "I love you, Jake. I messed up, but we can fix this. Please." Jake shook his head. "You don't get to decide that anymore." He pulled out his phone, showing her the photo he'd taken tonight, her and Tom caught in the act. "This is what you chose. Not me." He set the folder on the counter. "You've got 1 hour. Pack your things and go. I don't care where." Emma's sobs grew louder, but Jake walked to the living room, sitting in silence as the clock ticked. While Emma packed upstairs, Jake's mind raced. He wasn't just ending a marriage. He was reclaiming his life. But there was one more step. Tom's wife, Sarah, deserved to know. Jake knew her from church events, a quiet woman who stayed out of the spotlight, raising their 2 kids while Tom played the charming deacon. Jake pulled out his phone, found Sarah's number, and typed a message. "Need to talk. It's about Tom. Can we meet tomorrow?" He hit send, his resolve unshaken. Upstairs, Emma's footsteps shuffled, suitcases zipping shut. Jake didn't look at her as she came down, bags in hand, her face streaked with tears. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, pausing at the door. Jake didn't respond. The door clicked shut behind her, and the house fell silent. He sat there, the folder still on the counter, its photos a testament to the truth he'd uncovered. Tomorrow, he'd meet Sarah. Tomorrow, the consequences would spread. For now, he let the quiet sink in, knowing he'd taken the first step toward justice. Jake Sullivan woke to an empty house, the silence louder than any argument. Emma was gone, her suitcases taken the night before after he'd confronted her with photos of her affair with Tom Reynolds at the Lone Star Inn. The folder from Lisa Carter, his private investigator, still sat on the kitchen counter, its images of Emma and Tom a stark reminder of the betrayal that had shattered his trust. Jake didn't linger on it. He had one more move to make before closing this chapter. He'd texted Sarah, Tom's wife, last night, asking to meet. She'd replied within minutes, her message short. 10 a.m. My place. Jake brewed a coffee at Brewed Awakening, his Austin coffee shop, and opened early, serving regulars with a practiced smile. The routine kept him grounded, but his mind was on Sarah. She deserved the truth about her husband, just as he needed it about Emma. At 9:45, he left the shop in his assistant's hands and drove to Sarah's house, a modest ranch-style home in a quiet suburb. Sarah answered the door, her eyes tired but alert. She led Jake to the kitchen table, where a pot of coffee waited. Her 2 kids were at school, the house still except for the hum of a dishwasher. Jake didn't waste time. "This isn't easy," he said, setting the folder in front of her. "Tom's been cheating. With Emma. I found out last week." Sarah's hand froze on her coffee mug. She opened the folder, her breath catching as she flipped through the photos. Tom and Emma entering the motel, laughing, leaving together. Lisa's logs detailed dates and times, a meticulous record of their 3-month affair. Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "I knew something was off. He's been working late too much." She looked at Jake, her gaze sharp. "What did you do?" Jake recounted the previous night, catching Emma and Tom at the motel, confronting her, giving her an hour to leave. "I'm filing for divorce," he said. "I thought you should know before this blows up." Sarah nodded, closing the folder. "Thank you. I'll handle it." Her tone carried a quiet resolve that mirrored Jake's own. By noon, the news was spreading. Sarah didn't wait. She called Tom at his office, telling him not to come home. She packed his clothes and left them on the porch, changing the locks before he could argue. Word of the affair leaked through Grace Point Church's tight-knit community, whispers moving faster than Jake expected. By evening, customers at Brewed Awakening were murmuring about Tom and Emma, their once spotless reputations unraveling. Jake stayed out of it, serving coffee and dodging questions. He'd done his part. The rest was up to the truth. Emma tried to reach him. Her texts came in a flurry that afternoon, each one pleading, "I'm so sorry, Jake. Can we talk? It was a mistake, I swear. I still love you." Jake didn't respond. He blocked her number, his decision final. She showed up at the coffee shop the next day, her eyes red from crying, but Jake's assistant turned her away, saying he was busy. Emma left a handwritten note, begging for a chance to explain, but Jake tossed it unopened. Her words couldn't undo the months of lies. Tom faced his own fallout. Sarah filed for divorce the next morning, her lawyer citing the affair with irrefutable evidence from Lisa's photos. The church board, where Tom served as deacon, called an emergency meeting. By the end of it, he was stripped of his role, his name erased from event rosters. Parishioners who once clapped him on the back now avoided his gaze. His contracting business took a hit too. Clients canceled projects, unwilling to work with someone whose scandal was the talk of Austin. Jake kept his focus on the coffee shop, pouring his energy into new community events. He launched a free coffee day for teachers, drawing a crowd and earning praise from locals. Behind the counter, he felt the weight of curious glances, but he didn't engage. Some things sort themselves out, he'd say when pressed, his tone closing the door on gossip. The community's respect for him grew, not because of the scandal, but because of his quiet strength in handling it. Emma and Tom's affair, once a secret hidden in motel rooms, became a public wound. They didn't stay in touch. Shame and exposure killed whatever bond they'd had. Emma moved to a small apartment across town, her role at Grace Point reduced to nothing. She tried volunteering again, but the church politely declined her help, the sting of her betrayal too fresh. Tom rented a cheap studio, his life shrinking as friends and clients distanced themselves. Their affair, built on stolen moments, crumbled under the weight of reality. Jake met with his lawyer 2 days after confronting Emma. The divorce papers were straightforward. Emma's infidelity left no room for debate. He kept the house and brewed awakening. She took a portion of their savings and left. The process was swift, the evidence overwhelming. Jake didn't gloat or dwell. He signed the papers, shook his lawyer's hand, and drove back to the shop, ready to rebuild. Sarah, too, moved forward. She leaned on her family, who rallied around her and the kids. She started a part-time job at a local bookstore, her confidence growing with each day away from Tom. She texted Jake once, a simple message, "Thanks for the truth. I am okay." Jake replied, "You're stronger than he ever was." It was the last they spoke, but it felt like enough. As the days passed, Jake found a new rhythm. The coffee shop thrived, its tables filled with loyal customers and new faces drawn by his story. Not the scandal, but the way he carried himself through it. He wasn't a victim. He was a man who'd faced betrayal head-on and come out standing. The folder of photos stayed locked in his desk, a reminder of a truth he'd uncovered and a life he'd reclaimed. The road ahead was his to shape, and he was ready. Jake Sullivan stood behind the counter of Brewed Awakening, steaming milk for a latte as the morning rush filled his Austin coffee shop with chatter. It had been 3 months since he'd confronted Emma about her affair with Tom Reynolds, 3 months since he'd handed Sarah, Tom's wife, the photos that exposed their betrayal. The divorce was finalized, the papers signed, and Jake had kept the house and the shop. Emma walked away with a small share of their savings, her reputation in tatters. The scandal had shaken the community, but Jake was done with the past. He was building a future. The coffee shop was busier than ever. Jake had doubled down on community events, weekly open mics, charity drives for local shelters, even a kids' art contest that packed the place with families. Customers didn't just come for the coffee. They came for Jake's quiet resilience. He didn't talk about the affair, didn't feed the gossip mill, but his actions spoke louder than words. When a regular asked how he was holding up, he'd shrug and say, "Life moves forward. So do I." The community respected that. They saw a man who'd faced betrayal and emerged stronger. Emma's life, meanwhile, had unraveled. She'd moved to a cramped apartment on the edge of Austin, far from the church and the neighborhood where she'd once been a star volunteer. Grace Point Church had quietly distanced itself from her. No more fundraisers, no more prayer groups. Her attempts to reconnect were met with polite rejections. The trust she'd broken was irreparable. She called Jake a few times, leaving voicemails pleading for forgiveness, but he never answered. The last time she showed up at the shop, Jake's assistant handed her a coffee and a firm request to leave. She didn't come back. Tom's fall was even steeper. After Sarah kicked him out, his life as a church deacon and respected contractor collapsed. Grace Point stripped him of his role, and clients dropped him, unwilling to associate with the man at the center of the scandal. He moved into a cheap motel, not the Lone Star Inn, but close enough to feel ironic. His attempts to salvage his reputation failed. Old friends crossed the street to avoid him. The affair that had seemed so thrilling and secret left him isolated, his charm useless against the weight of his choices. Sarah, on the other hand, thrived. She'd taken a job at a local bookstore, her confidence growing with every shift. Her kids adjusted, supported by family and a tight circle of friends who'd rallied around her. She'd sold the house she'd shared with Tom, moving to a smaller place that felt like a fresh start. She didn't speak to Jake again, but her actions mirrored his quiet, deliberate steps toward a new life. The truth Jake had given her set her free, just as it had him. Jake's days were full, but not frantic. He hired a new barista to handle the growing crowds, giving him time to focus on the shop's future. He partnered with a local roaster to create a signature blend, Austin Sunrise, which sold out weekly. The shop became a symbol of his strength, a place where people gathered, not just for coffee, but for connection. Jake didn't dwell on the past, but the folder of photos from Lisa Carter stayed locked in his desk, a reminder of the truth he'd fought for and won. One evening, as he locked up, a woman lingered at a table, sketching in a notebook. She was a regular, Mia, a graphic designer who'd started coming for the open mics. "You're doing something special here," she said, closing her sketchbook. "This place feels like home." Jake smiled, the first real one in months. They talked for a while, her easy laugh cutting through his guardedness. He didn't rush into anything. Trust would take time, but the conversation felt like a step toward something new. Emma and Tom never crossed paths again. Their affair, once fueled by stolen moments, couldn't survive the light of day. Shame kept them apart, each carrying their own regrets. Emma took a job at a call center, her days monotonous, her social circle gone. Tom tried to start over in a new town, but word of his scandal followed, a shadow he couldn't shake. Their choices had cost them everything: friends, respect, the lives they'd built. Jake, meanwhile, found peace in his independence. He didn't hate Emma or Tom. He didn't need to. Their consequences were their own, a natural outcome of their lives. He focused on what he could control: his shop, his community, his own heart. At a fundraiser for a local school, the crowd cheered as he handed over a check, the result of weeks of donations. A neighbor clapped him on the shoulder and joked, "You're Austin's MVP, Jake." He laughed it off, but the words stuck. He wasn't a victim. He was a man who'd chosen truth over illusion. As winter settled over Austin, Jake stood outside Brood Awakening, watching the first snowflakes dust the sidewalk. The shop's windows glowed, laughter spilling out from an open mic night. He thought about the last year, the cryptic text, the motel, the photos, the confrontation. It had broken him, but it hadn't defined him. He'd rebuilt, not out of spite, but out of a quiet resolve to live honestly. The truth had been his shield, his guide, and now his legacy. He pulled his jacket tighter and stepped back inside, ready for whatever came next. The past was gone, but the future was his to shape, one coffee, one conversation, one honest moment at a time.